Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to webinar 4 of the series on the African AI Inequality Toolbox, where we have really been spotlighting and discussing Africa-based innovation and the applicability of the African AI Inequality Human Rights Toolbox, which was developed in collaboration with Women at the Table and the African Center for Technology Studies and recently released in September 2025. So the toolbox is designed to help policymakers, tech practitioners, and communities really build inclusive and rights-respecting AI systems. It maps the sixth stage of the AI lifecycle from design through deployment and monitoring, providing reflection questions, assessment tools, and African case studies at each stage. So we've previously examined stage 1, defining objectives, stage 2, team composition, and stage 3, system requirements. And today we're looking at stage 4, which is model selection and development. So what does it mean to select and develop a model? So before a model can be developed, it's important to consider what type of AI model is the best to satisfy the system requirements. And it's not always the most complicated deep learning algorithm that would be the most suitable for context. Instead, it's really about choosing the most suitable model for the required scope while managing trade-offs. And this is what we'll talk about today with our guests. And so the model development itself should be seen more of an iterative process. So it's really important at this stage to look back at data collection to ensure there's a good fit between the data, what you're intending to model, and the actual model chosen. So this process is also seen in the testing stage where the model is tested against the objective and then iteratively improved until it meets success metrics. So of course, as you can imagine, this stage is not just technical, it's about alignment, ensuring the model chosen fits the purpose, data realities, and community needs. And it's my great pleasure today to introduce Dr. Lilian Wanzare, a researcher at Maseno University in Kenya, whose work really sits at the intersection of language, technology, and inclusion. Dr. Wanzare leads projects that confront one of the most urgent challenges of our time, which is the disappearance of African languages and cultures from the digital space by reimagining how artificial intelligence can serve communities rather than replace them. And in conversation with Dr. Lilian Wanzare is Prof. Winston Ojenge, who's the principal research fellow and head of the ACTS AI Institute. And Prof. Winston will be in conversation with Dr. Lilian Wanzare, and I will hand it over to them to lead the discussion.
Thank you very much, Amina, for your title of Professor too. It's nice to have you here, Dr. Lilian Wanzare. It would be exciting to dive deep into some of the exciting works that you already done. And the first, of course, is the Ken Copus project, which is empowering the African languages through natural language processing. We are aware that this initiative began with a radical idea that communities themselves should be at the center of creating their own digital future and in their own languages. And faced with the absence of African languages on the digital space, you and your team then took a very powerful leap and delved deep into developing tools that are drawing data sets coming out of African languages. Through this community mobilization, we know linguistic collaboration and a deep respect for cultural context is highlighted here within the Ken Copus project. We shall be talking about that project briefly, but allow me then to introduce the second case that you've been working on, also a very novel idea. It is about bridging language barriers, basically trying to connect people who are deaf with content through the Kenyan Sign Language. Here the focus shifts to the invisibility of the Kenyan Sign Language in the digital realm and the exclusion that deaf students face in higher education. So rather than beginning with a technical prototype, this project has started with educational champions, that is teachers, deaf students, and community leaders who have helped define what technology was actually needed. This is a very powerful approach, starting from the user community to co-develop the problem with them. The goal was not simply translation, as we are aware now, but participation, creating tools that enable the deaf community to be fully included in educational and professional environments. Together, these two projects embody what the AI and Equality Toolbox stands for. And that is grounding AI innovations in human rights, in community engagement, and social justice. Very powerful and exciting philosophies. Today, we would like to explore how ethical, contextual, and community-centered thinking shaped these decisions you made about these two projects and their building process. I'm trying to work out where the best place to start this, and maybe we could start with a prompt. So I'd like to ask you, Doc, to briefly describe how the Ken Copus project and the Kenyan Sign Language projects evolved from identifying a social problem, as you did, to selecting the kind of AI models that could address these problems. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Prof. Thank you so much, Amina, for the introduction and for having me here. So what you're asking is quite a long story, okay? So as you rightly talked about, the two main work that you've been working on is one in terms of looking at the African languages, and particularly the languages spoken in Kenya, and asking ourselves, what can we do in order to increase their visibility, their availability in the technology space, okay? And I think the main challenge that we all know from the beginning is, because of historical reasons, we hardly write in our local languages, okay? This makes it hard to say you'll just scrap the web and find millions of tokens of any Kenyan language or any African language. There are a few pockets here and there, okay, of people who actually contribute, the ideas in their local language, but typically not so much. So now there's the idea of you want to be able to have this element, these languages in the digital space, but there is no data for it. So again, you have to go back to, okay, how do you get the data? How do we annotate the data for the right applications? Which applications do we begin with? Okay, because we are lacking a spell checker, we're lacking an LLM. That whole interface between the two, where do you actually begin from? Okay, what are the needs of the community? What do they really need? Do they want a spell checker? Do they want a chatbot, for instance? Yeah. So we found that it's really a journey of what is important for the community. Where do we start from? Which languages do we begin with? The larger languages, the smaller languages that are becoming extinct. Where is the value proposition? So there are many questions to ask as you begin through this journey. And that's why you've rightly said it has been a journey for over many years as we develop, okay? And if we go deeper into now, apart from our other languages, we know that there are other people who are able differently in the community, okay? How do we include them in this ecosystem, okay? And one of the things that came out strongly, particularly in our university, because we have a special needs education school and they focus in sign language as ourselves, sign language is an official Kenyan language. Then how can we add it into our data sets? How can we add it into the languages that we work with? Because it's not just, it's a fully fledged visual language, okay? And from their perspective, what is the most important to them as a community, okay? There are no directions, like you can look at, do we get from identification, that is checking at a recording or someone who is signing and understanding what are they saying, or do you move from, let's say, someone is speaking in English and the signers understanding what they are saying? Can they just use transcription? Do they have to have a visual representation? What really works for them? How do they interpret language in itself? Okay, and you see all those questions need to be answered by somebody who is not me, who is an expert in working with people who are from this particular community. So as you can see, there's a lot of social aspects to be thought about before now you say, let's build this model that works like this. Okay, so that's kind of the journey where we come from to where we are. I'm not sure that is if I had a good preamble for that.
Yeah, I know it. We'll unpack it. It's also exciting, and I'm hoping that we can dive slightly deeper into this. And I could probably start by asking this. Okay, we all know that AI, all these models you're developing are heavily, embedded in AI, and AI is equal to the data that comes to, to model it. We also know aware that there's very little existing data for African languages currently. And you must have wrestled, to strike a balance between the sophistication of your models versus accessibility of data, etc. How did you do this? How did you manage to identify the kind of model that you would want to start with?
Thank you. So as you've rightly said, so there's this fundamental problem, like there is no enough, let me say, quality data for different use cases. Okay, that is the base that all of us are working. But there's a whole realm of models that exist, okay, that have been developed over the years. Okay, from the days of statistical modeling, okay, to when we had now this by LSTM kind of models, yeah, to now we have transformer and decoder kind of model. So this whole journey. So where do we start from? Okay, other languages have had the beauty of testing their languages with so many types of models, and they have been improving it over and over in time. The African language is coming in when we have a huge space for models, but not enough data to work with the most sophisticated model. Okay, and again, we understand how the big models are developed. That means they are, pre-trained with existing data. Okay, is your language part of that data that was used to pre-train the model? It can be yes. Okay, it can be no. Okay, so as you think about this model, then what do you want to think about? You're looking for models that are able to work. There's the whole challenge of if you have to begin from scratch, how much effort would it take you? There are things that you also learn from using models that already have learned what language is, rather than beginning from scratch. Again, beginning from scratch means that we need a lot of data for it, maybe made a lot of computations, and things like that. Yeah. So ask yourself, what is practically possible with the kind of resources that you're able to use? Okay, that was a hard question for us, especially if you're coming from a research community that even there is the kind of resources to be able to exploit is not there. It's different if you're coming from a more enabled kind of research community. Okay. So in think of it, the most obvious things come to mind. Okay, do transfer learning. Yes. Pick a big model, okay, that maybe had your language in it. Well and good, try it. If you didn't have your language in it, then you're really doomed. Nothing much you can do unless you try one or two things or look for a smaller model. But the main thing we think about is adaptability of this kind of models. Are we able to fine-tune them in smaller data sets? Okay, if it is yes, we try them. If it is no, we leave them because there is no point of taking so much effort in them. Okay, those particular architectures, okay, that we develop, the resources that we have in the universities and the local system, are we able to fine-tune them efficiently? If not, we drop them. If yes, we try them. Okay, whatever models that we build, are we able to integrate different nuances of our languages in terms of dialects, the variety of the languages, code switching? Okay, if it is yes, we pick them. If it is no, we, so there are so many things that you think about before you say, let us try this kind of system. And if I give an example, we have tried many systems, for instance, for the sign language project. Simple rule-based system to the hybrid models that have rule-based components of it with the deep learning components of it, okay? That kind of fits into this idea of we don't have a lot of data. We are trying to build something to show a use case, okay, before you end up with a very sophisticated kind of model. If the other languages, data that we have, if we had 200 hours, what do we start with? If you had 50 hours, 200 hours, as we move and as we grow. So again, it's really not one answer I can be able to say. but to think about what is important and what do you want to prioritize. So that's how we went into now saying, let us pick, this model to start with what we have.
Yeah, thank you very much. That is eye-opening. Actually, my next question would have been how you handle the difficulty of the Kenyan culture, particularly of code switching, in English, Kiswahili, vernacular, English, vernacular, and some of the oral traditions that are heavily contextual to the various African languages. But I think I now quite understand clearly the amount of work you have to keep tweaking here in order to just get exactly what you want. But still be around the Ken Copus. We know that most platforms that are already trained in natural language, particularly English, are existing. They're foundational, and a lot of us attempted to come and embed our own data on top of them. And we also know that they are mostly developed from Western or data sets coming from the global North. How did you go about this? Because I'm trying to imagine how difficult it is to start building foundational models from scratch.
Yes.
But have you been converting this to fit the context of Kenya and African languages? Yeah.
Okay, I think that is the main challenge. Sometimes we ask ourselves, like when we're beginning to collect the voice data sets for the Ken Copus, we asked ourselves, what do you want to collect? Do you want to collect how the people speak or how they should speak? Okay. As in, at the end of the day, yes, they could be speaking Swahili. They could be speaking a local language, okay? There's how they speak, but there's how the linguists would like us to be able to speak. What is considered the correct way of speaking it, yeah? So again, it asks the kind of system we want to develop, how do we go about it? So again, when you talk about it, say, do we say do not code switch or you should code switch? Or do we say it has to be this perfect way of speaking or we don't record your voice? So that was really a challenge. So we have to pick all this nonsense. And then there's regional dialects, okay? There's this region, the other region, whose dialect is the most ideal? Probably everyone's dialect, because that's part of the particular different languages, okay? And then you have to think about issues of what you've raised. If you look at the language models, yeah, they have a dominance of where they've been trained on, okay? But again, you want to be able to adapt them or use them to be able to develop models for your languages that have many nuances. I ask, will these nuances be captured in this particular model? Okay. If you're going to adapt them, yeah, how will you be able to do what to make sure that all these dialects are captured, the ideas of code switching are captured, the ideas of not necessarily the way it should be spoken, but how they actually speak on the ground, if I use that word, is spoken. Okay. So when you're thinking about adapting these models, we looked at the evaluation step and ask ourselves, what do you want to be able to come out of this? So when you test different models, you see which one brings out the intended outputs that you want out of the particular models. Then you end up choosing X over particular Y. Okay. So you don't have to say, do I adapt or do I build? Yeah, you try. Okay. And see if you build a simple, let's say, model, how does it work? If you try to adapt one that has a language similar to your language or your language already in it, how will it work? Is it capturing context? Is it capturing the different dialects? Then you're able to pick. So it's really, you critically audit how these models handle the different languages. Okay, and then you decide to choose a particular one. It's one thing to say, the benchmark got X and Y, but the output of the benchmark is evaluated by the local person. What will they say about it? Is it capturing their nuances? So we ended up doing an audit of models. Okay, before we said, now we are picking this, but our choices of what to pick are based on what aspects of our languages is it capturing? Is it capturing or not? And not just saying it is getting XY value out of some benchmark statistics that you're looking into it. So it's not a binary question, but yes, we try and be able to think about which one will be able to fit in a different, in each of their settings. So culturally inclusive, does it capture the linguistic differences? Does it allow us to be able to add and improve different aspects? Are you able to monitor why it's missing X or Y? Then you pick a particular word. So it's really about auditing. because there's a huge space of existing models, and relying on also other research that looked at similar examples, maybe in South America or in Asia, that have also the issue of different languages. Yeah, and then we build that. So for us, it's about really auditing.
Wow, that is quite exciting. There's also still maybe the last inquiry around Ken Copus is the transparency is considered a major ethical principle for AI systems. I know developers a lot of times don't quite agree that you can actually become totally transparent and enable all users to be able to see through an AI, which is of course a complex technology. But I know that we are aware that through constant interaction as you develop this with the user community, with the sources of the data, or mainly the user community, there's a lot of transparency that could manifest. How do you manage this? How do you manage transparency with the communities that you build this with, who probably will also be the ones to use this?
I think what you've said is true. Transparency, and imagine transparency from a community that really don't have an idea of what you're trying to do. If somebody has an idea, it's easier to explain, but someone doesn't have an idea why it will be doing X or Y as an output. Okay. So we found that what worked for us was a more modular approach, such that at different stages of the project. So let's say we started with collecting the data. Then we showed them, this is the data that we collected. There are some issues here. What do you think about these issues? If we have these issues here, if we make the model have similar issues. So they already see that actually their contribution contributes to the output of the particular model. But when they see that, they know that maybe it was something that we did, or it was an artifact of our input. Okay. And then the aspect that you're able to do and think about this is for most, especially when you look at the Kenyan corpus languages, yeah, most of these transformer models are really black boxes. Yeah, you can't really explain to someone what miracle goes on in here. That are the outputs. We have a model that translates from English to Kiswahili, for instance. What is the magic behind the scenes that goes on here? Okay. So again, these particular aspects, we really relied on the fact that when the model has an output with the first version, we go back to the community, they test it and see what errors are there in the particular system. Then we help them see where they're coming from. We contribute data again, and we do another iteration of participation and cooperation with the particular communities. Okay, they might understand what exactly goes on because we really use transformer models. They won't understand exactly what is going on here, but with iteration and they see the improvement of the model, they appreciate, okay, it is actually learning from us. It's actually seeing what you're doing and improving. Okay, so for them, that is more or less showing that they are contributors to the development of this beautiful tool that will enable them now translate their data. Okay, without having to really know how the neurons are, firing within. Okay, from the technical perspective, yes, we can have visualization on our side. We see why is it picking X or Y. But sometimes that kind of visualizations really are overwhelming to our language communities. Okay, we use it for internal validation with our linguists who are more informed. But the communities we tend to use, towards the output, we're able to see and challenge the errors and look at data and look at output and balance those particular two and really be able to see how that particular aspect really takes place. So with that approach, they kind of feel the trust that it is not just coming up with things. We are teaching it, okay? And that for them gives an element of trust. Even if they don't know the miracle behind this particular black box, but they are seeing the evolution of the model as it captures their various aspects. Like the sign language that we did. When we did our first draft and we went to the schools, they laughed because it was just, it was funny for them. But when we told them, it's doing this because if you look at these inputs, they have this and this aspect, they said, aha, okay, then let's be able to make our movements more succinct so that now the output also becomes more, pristine in how it's doing the particular science. So again, when the next iteration came, it's now better, okay, because they see, okay, it has improved from this particular part to the next particular improvement, okay? So really, really, it's a nice co-creation that we have developed with the community, especially the language communities, and not like the linguists who are more experts and are able to understand different nonsenses. I don't know if that helps. There's no, that helps kind of to explain transparency for us, how we looked at it. Yes.
Oh, certainly. Yeah, quite impressive. I would really love to come back to the Ken Copus. There are loads of questions that I'm still curious about. However, allow me to shift gears and go to the Kenyan Sign Language. This first question is bare. How did you decide what problem that you'd want to solve first, knowing the complexity of the sign language? Is it the gestures recognition? Is it accessibility? Is it translation? And what guided these priorities? Which path you took? Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So from the sign language project, because you are in the institution, okay, and we have not such a large community of people who are having hearing impairment in the university. It's not a large community, okay. We asked them, what kind of tools do we start with? I don't know, they're doing the proposal stage, okay, because there's a whole realm of tools. And the question that came up really for them is, I am relying on my classmates in class, okay? Can I have some autonomy as a person, okay? Just be able to understand what the lecturer is saying without having to copy the notes from my neighbor, okay? In that particular context, that was fundamental for them, okay? Maybe in another context, maybe if the hospital say, I'd like to be able to, for somebody to understand what I am saying. But for that context, it's important for us to start with, are they able to follow along in class, at least as a start? Then we can now build upon it and say, they're now able to, others are not able to understand what their words say. So from our context, that was the most important thing. Another important thing for them is a repository of sites, okay, that they're able to search, because even the people who are having hearing impairment want to improve their language skills. Where do they go to improve their language? There's nowhere. There's nowhere they can say, I'm going to read a book and improve my English. Yeah. But where do you go to watch something to improve your sign language skills? There's nothing like that. Yeah. So can they have somewhere where they can be able to go and just search and say and practice how to do, hail or goat or camel, whatever thing it is. Okay. So they're really fundamental, or really look basic, but that was a changing aspect, for them. So you said, okay, fine. Let us see how to be able to collect this data and represent it in a way for it to be able to use, okay, as a learning tool. But also, let us see if we're able to build a tool that now enables you to follow along in class. Okay, how will that look? We asked ourselves, we again asked them, but you see, you can actually use ASR, okay? They are good ASR models for English. Why can't you just put it here and let the lecturer speak and you read along? And then they say, you don't understand how we look at language. Our minds are visual, okay? It takes me so much effort to read a sentence than to see somebody who is signing. And I think that's when I realized that there are different ways of how the brain fires. For a person who is auditory oriented, people who are hearing, or somebody who is visually oriented. People use their eyes to translate languages into meaning. Okay? And they are very, very different from spatial to auditory. They're really different. Yeah. And when that came, then we said, okay, we are assuming that they can use the ASR, but it doesn't really help them much. It's a big assumption. Yeah. They'll rather have a visual representation and they follow along even if there's a time lapse. But at least they follow along until the particular words. And then we said, okay, then let us build that and now produce an avatar for you. Okay, so you see that's how we came up with, now let's build an avatar output and think about how you're able to follow along in class. That was the beginning. So we have the data for learning, and then we have the model for moving from text or speech to be able to sign. But it's really understanding where they're coming from. And you say, like, for instance, the structure of English is different, yeah? Okay, compared to the structure of the sign language, yeah? Where we start with subject, verb, objects, or then they start with the, some other aspect of it and have the verb at the very end. You first place the subject, place the object, then you talk about the verb at the end, yeah? So that really changes how they interpret. Yeah, so that's how we ended up doing the first two projects that we did out of the inputs that they gave us as a community, as immediate needs. Of course, there are many needs, but as immediate needs. Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's a extremely difficult issues. I'm trying to imagine that if Kenyan Sign Language captures hand shape and hand movement, gestures, but we know in normal communication we even have facial expression that complements communication too, adds context, etc.
Yes.
But now, how to make the avatars be able to develop similarly or facial expressions similarly to be able to communicate. It's quite difficult. But do you think that there are works or efforts that are heading towards this?
Yeah, yes, there are a bit of efforts because there are sign languages that have had years of research, maybe American Sign Language, British Sign Language, okay? They've had a chance to be able to collect data and be able to try out different models to be able to come up with this. Yeah. The main element that they wanted us to evaluate is naturalness, okay? Which is the output of the avatar. Is it feeling like it's a natural, it's human? Okay, that was very important for them, the naturalness. Yeah, it was less important whether it was male or female, it was black or white. What was important for them, does it feel natural in the outputs, and is it doing the correct output, of course, okay, as a part of what is important. Yeah, and like you rightly said, there are those hand features, but they go hand in hand with the non-manual, the expressions or the movement of the eyes, the movement of your eyebrows, the movement of your cheeks, even if you're inflating them or deflating them, they have different connotations. Yeah. So how do we capture all this? And we also realize that there's difference in gender expressions. Yeah. Like you find that when a female is signing, they have more non-manual female features. Okay. Than when a male is signing. Yeah. So how do we balance the two? Because sometimes we look at these two people are signing the same sign. But why is she adding more things than this? They're more expressive. It's the same way you can say a woman is more expressive in English. They also express themselves more in their facial expressions. Yeah. So how do we balance what? The two, the meaning and the other expressions? Because when you're sad, you should show the sadness in your face. Okay. And things like that. Yeah. So we had one disadvantage because we did not have a studio-like place to record. Because in principle, we're supposed to record a 3D so that you're able to see the whole, but you only had a front-facing camera. That means you're only capturing from one side. Okay, that's a major disadvantage that you're working on, to do a full 3D recording of signs. But as you build your model, it's able to understand the signs from different directions. Okay, because it's actually very important for that. Okay. So that you're able to capture different things. And then when we were now looking at extracting the data, okay, we asked ourselves which kind of models are able to capture both the movement of the hands and also, at least to some great extent, the facial features and the body features. Yeah. And we ended up picking things that are about these post-estimation models like MediaPipe, that extracts those features. Okay. And it was kind of a way to abstract away from the person and focus more on the movements, okay, and not entirely the person. Yeah, you lose something small when you're looking at post-estimation, okay, but you still have most of what you need at the end of it all. But again, the other thing is you enable us to anonymize those outputs without having to really work with or release the actual videos of the particular person's particular sign. So with that in mind, so you ended up using models that are able to understand movements of the hands and also movements of the face. And then when you're also looking at modeling, we looked at models that are able to look at different frames, understand the sequences of the different frames. Okay, is it able to capture as you move from one sign to the next sign? Is it able to capture that particular movement? So it's a kind of a sequential model. Okay, but capturing the movements from one sign to another sign and things like that. Yeah? So at the end of the day, it's more work to work with sign language, because it's not just like text or just audio. There are extra layers of semantic information that need to be captured that are not really subtle to be able to to capture them. Yes.
Yeah, that is for sure is a fact. And During, for instance, during this iteration that you talked about, you use iteration a lot, a very powerful method in development, especially with user communities. Now you, for instance, are developing this with a deaf person, and you have to keep, using feedback to be able to validate the accuracy of a particular gesture and what it suggests to the user or to the deaf person. Do you have challenges of this constant feedback with them, or how do you do this?
So that's why I say that to work with the people in this community, I cannot go there as Lilian, okay, because I don't understand the community, okay. So the first thing was to be able to form an association, if I call it that word, with the people who understand a particular community, okay. That is the deaf language educators, okay. And there are two types. So there are people, the deaf educators who are hearing, but they're able to teach. But there are those who are actually deaf themselves, and also deaf language educators. For them to be able to introduce us to the community, because they understand what borders should not be crossed, when you're working in this particular word community. So they don't feel like there's this feeling like we are benefiting from their disability. You get it? Yeah, you're the one who's benefiting from the disability, and not them themselves. Okay, and that is the last thing you need for something that you're supposed to build for a given community. They should feel like they're the ones going to benefit, not you as a researcher going to benefit. Yeah? So it took a back step, and we let the people who are in that to took the forward step, okay, to be able to go to them, explain to them. Like, we hardly ever said anything much when you're going to the communities to be able to just the introduction, and the rest we leave them, because I can't explain it to them. Somebody who is signing has to explain. So that's why the linguists who are now educators were our primary researchers, okay, to work with, and to linkages between us and the words and the community, because they understand them. Otherwise, you can easily go there and tell us, you people are just benefiting from us. We don't want to talk to you, and that is the last thing that you need from this particular community. So it's good to really understand, who can assist you to get to them, and it also improves adoption, because now they really see that it's part of them. Then they're able to easily try it out, okay, and test it out and laugh about it without feeling like they're offending anyone and things like that. Yes, so that's how we approach this community. That are very vibrant. Yes.
Yeah, for sure. This next question is I'm a bit uncomfortable asking you, knowing that I've also developed AI systems before, and that is the question of explainability. You say most users would like to track how the AI makes its decisions. They want to be explained to. When you take your child to the doctor, when the doctor suggests that, no, I think the child is suffering from pneumonia, you want an explanation. How did you arrive there? So that this creation of trust. I can understand how you can make this transparent to the user community that you're developing with. Of course, you can't develop with everyone who will use this system.
Definitely, yes.
But to the user who was not part of the development process, there may be need for some level of explainability about how this particular decision has been arrived at. This is a question you don't have to answer, because I know how difficult this is. But just in any case, you've been thinking about how to create that sort of module, ability in your AI to explain.
It's very difficult, especially for language, if I might use a particular term. Yeah. So, for instance, if you're trying to see why is a translation, let me use a system for translation. System gives this output. Okay. We have to think about building a whole tool that kind of goes into seeing why did it pick this trace of words. Okay. Or if you think about an ASR, why did this model, give this output? They don't think about how did the model pick this, set of writings as the output. Okay. And it is harder for language kind of data. It is different from somebody who's saying, what example you're giving about why the model is saying you have pneumonia. Okay, there could be sequence of firing, yeah? But it's difficult to say why did it choose of all these 1,000 combination of words, this particular combination of words, Okay, so again, when you talk about explainability for us, it was more not so easy to come up with a way to say the model picked this route, to come to this particular word output. But it was more towards explaining to them how the model learns and why it might be able to fail or where it may be able to do what to fail. Okay, so that they see that it is possible, that it is learning. It's not that it is fail. It's not perfect. It's not like a perfect human being. Okay, it fails. Okay, then you ask yourself why this model, what is supposed to serve? Okay, it's serving translation, so it's supposed to work for only the translation. You can't ask it another thing. Okay, I don't really know about. So the main thing about for us for explainability in our workflow, it was hard for us to visualize for them the working of the model. That one we were not able to achieve that. I think you've rightly said it. Okay, be able to see why it is picking this particular model, but more or less explaining to them the possibilities of why the errors were coming into place. So that was it's a really challenge for us, especially with these kinds of language model that we're trying to build. So I don't have really a direct answer, like you've said, about explainability of that kind of models. Yeah.
Agree totally. You've passed with flying colors in that particular question. It's a difficult one for all of us. Now, in both cases, again, you suddenly don't have limitless data. You definitely are a trailblazer in this space, and therefore you're working with limited data. You probably also don't have limitless compute or computing power. Even your funds, I know, are not limitless. And and I wonder how you manage to achieve performance, accuracy, and inclusivity. What magic do you work to be able to do this?
It is not magic. It is constant working on constraining environments. Yeah. Okay. So yes, it's rather, I don't want to use the word unfortunate. It's a rather difficult place to be. Okay. If you have from limited data to limited compute to limited funds, to limited resources, maybe limited capacity, in terms of you're not really maybe conversant with the most sophisticated model. That means you have a whole series of limitations on a particular site. Okay. But then how do we make it possibly work with all these situations? How do we make it work? That is the question you're supposed to ask us. Yeah. Then we ended up defining for us, what does work mean for us? Okay. Does work mean it will get 100% of the data, of the things correct? Does work mean for us it is able to capture this aspect? So we really, this definition of what is good for us, okay, is what we really need to talk about. Yeah. So that when we really simplify that, then we're able to see progress even in the simplicity, because that means that whatever we have defined, that what does work mean in this particular context. Okay, so even if you build a smaller model or a less sophisticated model, okay, that captures this particular variety that you're looking at, that for us means it is working. Okay, if you build a simple architecture, okay, and when the community uses it, they feel like, yes, actually capture what we need, that means it is working. Okay, so in this our context, we really thought about what does good mean for us, yeah, and then we looked at how do we build that and improve in different phases, because it's hard to say we will start by building the most sophisticated model. There is no capacity, there is no funds, there is resources for that, yeah. But if you're able to start small, then you define what is good for us, what works for us, then we improve it, yeah. So it's really it's kind of a trade-off and a compromise on our side, okay. But again, at the end of the day, when the output comes and it does something that you're looking for it to do, it becomes an achievement. Though small, but it becomes a kind of an achievement for us. Okay. And when we went to ask our students here, how will they want this thing to work for them? Okay, they might not have the best of smartphones or the best of machines. That means that maybe they might have the biggest of models. They might just be using a simple smartphone. Yeah, does it be able to work for them, that particular environment? So then you think about then even the biggest of models might not be the best for them. Okay, because they're looking at it, they have a simpler smartphone, okay, that they're sharing even. How would it work for them? So really for us, it's really a compromise, but looking at how do we see, how do we define what is, working for us here? And then we weigh that against now, perfection, which might not really be possible with the current resources.
Yeah, I agree totally. My last question, and this one is I know it's a bit heavy. AI and equality toolbox that we
Yes.
Developing here is a heavily human rights based, and we are very proud about that.
Yeah.
So, human rights means that we are struggling, that the AI that you develop, you as a developer now, needs to be transparent, it needs to be inclusive, it needs to be accountable, it needs to be explainable. And yet we want you you want the AI to be accurate and performing in order to scale. And sometimes these look like they are conflicting against each other. And so I wonder, out of all these ethical principles that we, the tool is demanding, which one matters most to you? Which one do you feel you want to prioritize against the others? I know everything has to be ranked. You can't, be able to. You can't have an AI that is totally complete in all the demands of ethics. But tough question.
Yeah.
But what do you say?
It's a tough question. Yeah. So all those principles are very important.
Yes.
At the end of it all. Yeah. But when you looked at this toolbox, what are the things that was most important for us in the particular phases was, at the end of the day, we were looking at developing systems that represent the voices of the community and works for them. So for us, it being non-discriminatory and being representative was very important. So is it representative enough of our communities? I think for the communities, it's very important that all their voices are heard. Okay, so we picked that as one of our core principles as we worked through this particular journey. Whatever we build, we capture different variations, okay, that no one feels like, you're focusing on even a simple thing as if you're not the Luo community. Is it the Siaya version or the Southern version? Even that really was a huge debate. What is the correct Luo? We said all of them are okay, as in there's no correct, so that everybody feels like they are represented and you're not discriminating anyone. Okay, so that was really a core principle for us. So that whole participation and involvement of the different communities, became really, really core. Okay, as you can see, the one for equality and non-discrimination and one for participation are very core. But then when we come to the one for transparency and accountability, it was harder for us to achieve that. Okay, so we looked at what ways are we able to use to achieve some element of transparency, okay, to the particular community. Okay, and even though they look like conflicting, but we felt like, or we still feel like, if you really focus on representation and participation, then there's no strong requirement, or there's no strong pushback about transparency, because they really feel they're part of the system. They really don't understand completely. Okay, the fact that now it is a black box to some extent. Okay, though we tried also to do rule-based systems as a way to increase the transparency bit of it, but the participation approach helped us to be able to kind of not have to struggle so much to enforce transparency, which is a bit harder looking at the tools that exist for doing transparency. But if you look at accountability, yes, okay, you're able to go back to the community and they evaluate the output of the system and really say that, yes, it is okay or not okay, with different non-standard metrics of what okay means to them as a particular community, especially the people who are working from the deaf water community. Okay, so yeah, so yes, we really like that human rights-based approach. Okay, that really enforces that bit. And then we also included other, the typical ethical approaches that include, security, transparency, accountability, and things like that embedded within this whole process. So that is how we looked at it as a team for building of AI kind of system in this African setting. Okay.
This has been super. I would have wanted to stay here with you for 2 more hours, but I know that is impossible. I would need to hand you back over to Amina. But certainly I need to express this, that I think you guys are trailblazers. You're doing a wonderful job. You're trying to achieve performance and accuracy, but also trying to embed it or steep it in heavy human rights. And we really respect and appreciate that. And I think we will need to talk more on this at a convenient time. So
Yes,
Amina,
thank you so much.
can take over. Thank you so much, Lilian.
Thank you too, Mr.
Thank you, Prof. Thank you, Dr. Lilian. And I can only agree. I think this is very complex work. So thank you very much for your time and for your reflections, because it's really amazing to see work that we don't often hear about on the continent. And I wish we could also translate this to Arabic, to French, to expand it to other parts of the continent and really allow them to witness what is possible and what can be done with community research and with the grounded solutions. Thank you so much to everyone who's joined. Next week, we dive into a new case study and actually the 5th stage of the AI life cycle, which is testing and interpreting outcomes. And we'll be hosting Alicia Olago from Code for Africa on a case study on air monitoring sensors. So please join us, check the website, watch the case studies on YouTube, and also you can read about them on the Africa AI Equality Toolbox. So thank you for joining us and have a beautiful evening.